the show today, Anthony Abbagnano. Did I say it right?
Got it.
Nailed it. Okay, good. He is an extremely experienced breath worker, friend of my mate Jamie Cato, I think introduced us originally, founded Alchemy of Breath, the Asha community, describes himself as a rebel philosopher, an itinerant, a lover of love. I've heard so many good things. I'm looking forward to this. So, sir, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure.
How did you get interested in the body and the breath, Anthony? Well, how did that happen?
Well, that's a story. I first met breathwork when I was 10 years old, and someone came and shoved a paper bag in front of my face and said, breathe into that. And so I did. And after about 20 breaths, he hugged me from behind and he squeezed my chest, and then he very gradually let me down to the ground. And I had the most extraordinary experience that I'd ever had at that point. You can imagine. I saw stars, and I kind of understood that there was something that made more sense than what surrounded me at that point in time in my life.
You reminded me of early childhood experience. I think we did something a bit like that, but with a spliff involved, with it being behind. Yeah. And so this name rebirthing, that's always confused me. Where does that come from? Is it just an analogy? Is it? I'm curious about that name.
Yeah, it is. It's a great name, because when you think, I mean, here's the deal. We tend to forget about our breath from the first breath we take until the last one we let go of. We're not very conscious of it. So when you start to place focus on that, and I encourage people to do that when they breathe with me, to imagine what that first breath would have been like. It would have been completely unconditional, this grasp of everything, no filters, nothing, just a state of complete wonder and openness and curiosity. And so I use that as a way to get people to breathe that consciously. What if each breath you bring could bring that kind of possibility to it? I tend to get people to associate their exhale with their exhalation with their final breath. What would that be like? What do you take with you? There's nothing that you can take with you that we know of. So I try get people to think of that each cycle of breath as a birth and a death, because it is potentially, and it will be eventually. And so when people begin to associate that kind of importance to something that we take for granted, something happens.
What's gone on with this kind of second wave? How is it similar? How is it different from the kind of stuff in the 70s?
That's a really good question.
Okay, I've got half an hour before I start work. I want to do a bit of breath work in the morning. Maybe I've got a weekend off in a month that I can do a workshop on. I've got choices. So how do I make sense of this sort of rainforest of techniques we now find ourselves in?
Well, I think the first step is to make a commitment to become intimate with the breath. And then the next step is to become intimate with what it brings, because it brings all kinds of things. Is there any purpose going out there and harvesting more than we can bring back in our basket? Really, it's a question of measure and appropriateness.
I really like that metaphor, Anthony. I hope you don't mind. I might take that. Can we, harvest what we can actually take in our basket and digest? Sometimes I use it as a metaphor. Yeah. Different breathwork techniques. I know it's kind of a strange question for a man that's got loads. Do you have any sort of classics that you would say to anyone listening? Listen, maybe you're not going to become a breath worker and get trained by me or Dan or whoever, but you should at least know this. Would you have a kind of these two or three tools?
I've got a couple.
Everyone's toolkit.
Yeah, I've got a couple, even three. I'd say, first of all, as just a breath awareness, a level 1 breath awareness exercise, is to know that the lungs are like a balloon. They don't just come forwards and upwards. But if we take a breath, that's kind of what we do, right? We stick our chest out or our belly and we raise our shoulders a bit like that. But we don't consider that there's other possibilities that are happening there too. And so I call it the balloon breath, which is just, first of all, to take a big inhale and to experience your rib cage open sideways for the first breath. And then, so inhale and expand sideways, and you can discover, oh yeah, there's something that wants to move sideways there, but I never thought about it before. And then the other one is it actually does the same going backwards. If you give attention to your spine and where the ribs meet, and you can actually feel that it'd be very natural for it to expand backwards. So in other words, we can then start to get a 360 expansion when we breathe.
Boom, I love it. Should we take a breath together to finish?
Yeah, all right.
Follow your lead.
Wow.
Anthony, total pleasure, man. Nice to meet you.